Welcome to Danger, the channel where we dive into the world's most chilling true crime stories. Please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get notified every time we post something. The case of Scott Kologi stands as one of the most chilling and unsettling family tragedies in recent American history, not only because of the number of lives lost, but because of where it happened and who was responsible. This wasn't a crime committed by a stranger or an intruder. It happened inside a home, carried out by someone who was supposed to be part of the family. The story begins in the quiet, affluent township of Colts Neck. Known for its sprawling properties, privacy, and peaceful atmosphere, Colts Neck is the kind of place where violent crime is rare. The Kologi family lived in a large home set back from the road, an environment that seemed safe, secure, and far removed from danger. Stephen and Linda Kologi were raising their children in this environment, building what appeared to be a stable and comfortable life. To neighbors and outsiders, the family kept a relatively low profile. There were no obvious public signs that anything was deeply wrong, but as is often the case in stories like this, what people see from the outside rarely reflects the full picture. In the months leading up to November 2017, Scott Kologi, then just 16 years old, was reportedly experiencing increasing tension within the household. While details that emerged later suggested arguments and conflict, it's important to understand that these issues didn't necessarily stand out as extreme at the time. Like many teenagers, Scott had disagreements with his parents. However, investigators would later consider whether these tensions were part of a deeper, more serious internal struggle. There were also indications that Scott had become more withdrawn. Changes in behavior, such as isolation, defiance, and emotional distance, are often mentioned in cases like this, though they are not always recognized as warning signs until after tragedy occurs. In hindsight, every small detail begins to carry more weight. Then came the night of November 20, 2017, a night that would permanently change everything. Inside the Kologi home, events unfolded that would shock the entire nation. Armed with a rifle, Scott Kologi carried out an attack that resulted in the deaths of 4 people: his father Stephen, his mother Linda, his sister Brittany, and a family friend, Mary Schultz, who had been staying at the house. The presence of a guest among the victims made the crime even more tragic, highlighting just how far-reaching the impact was. The violence that took place inside the home turned what should have been a place of safety into a scene of unimaginable horror. For many people following the case, one of the most disturbing aspects was the personal nature of the crime. These were not strangers, they were immediate family members. Amid the chaos, Scott's younger brother managed to survive. Realizing the danger, he hid during the attack. His survival is often described as both miraculous and heartbreaking. In the aftermath, he became one of the only direct witnesses to what had happened inside the home. His experience would later play an important role in helping investigators reconstruct the timeline of events. The discovery of the crime added another layer of tragedy. Scott's older brother, unable to reach the family, became concerned and went to the house. What he encountered was devastating beyond words. Recognizing the severity of the situation, he contacted authorities immediately. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they found multiple victims inside the residence. Scott Kologi was still there. In a detail that many find chilling, he did not attempt to escape. He was taken into custody without resistance. The quiet neighborhood quickly became the center of a major investigation, as police secured the area and began processing the scene. As investigators worked to understand what had happened, they began examining every aspect of Scott's life, his behavior, his relationships, and his mental state. They also looked at how he was able to access the weapon used in the attack. The presence of firearms in the home became a key part of the investigation, raising broader questions about access and responsibility. Prosecutors would later argue that the attack showed signs of planning. They pointed to the sequence of events and the manner in which the crime was carried out as evidence that it was not purely impulsive. However, understanding motive proved to be far more complex. The case moved slowly through the legal system, in part because of the seriousness of the charges and Scott's age at the time of the crime. Being a minor added legal complexity, particularly when it came to how he would be tried and sentenced. By 2022, the case finally reached trial. Inside the courtroom, the focus shifted from what happened to why it happened. Prosecutors presented a case centered on accountability, arguing that Scott Kologi knowingly and intentionally carried out the killings. They emphasized the number of victims and the devastating consequences of his actions. The defense, on the other hand, focused heavily on Scott's mental health. They argued that he was struggling psychologically and that this played a significant role in his actions. Cases like this often bring attention to the intersection of mental health and criminal responsibility, raising difficult questions about how the justice system should respond. Throughout the trial, emotional testimony and evidence painted a picture of a family destroyed from within. For the loved ones of the victims, the courtroom became a place not only of legal proceedings, but of grief and remembrance. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on multiple counts of murder. It was a decisive moment in a case that had taken years to unfold. While the verdict provided a measure of justice, it could not undo the loss or fully explain the tragedy. During sentencing, the judge addressed the severity and impact of the crime, describing it as deeply disturbing. The loss of 4 lives, the trauma experienced by the surviving sibling, and the shock to the community were all acknowledged. Scott Kologi was sentenced to life in prison, with a requirement that he serve a significant portion of that sentence before being eligible for parole. Even after the sentencing, the case continues to leave a lasting impression on those who hear about it. It raises questions that are difficult to answer. What leads someone so young to commit such a devastating act? Were there warning signs that could have been recognized earlier? And what can be done to prevent similar tragedies in the future? For many, the case of Scott Kologi is a reminder that danger doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes, it exists in places we least expect, hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Thank you for watching. If you want more factual and respectful true crime content, please like, subscribe, and share. And as always, stay safe.